Have you ever noticed how some people command immediate respect when they walk into a room, while others, despite their desperate attempts, seem to be constantly overlooked or disregarded? What if everything you thought you knew about earning respect was actually working against you? Respect is one of those elusive qualities we all crave. In our relationships, our workplaces, our families, we want to be taken seriously. Yet so many of us are unconsciously sabotaging our own authority by falling into a common psychological trap, mistaking approval-seeking behavior for respect-building actions. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. Think about the last time you felt the need to explain yourself excessively, or when you found yourself trying to please someone who consistently dismisses your boundaries. How did that work out for you? Did it increase their respect for you or somehow diminish it? The fascinating reality is that respect operates on principles that seem counterintuitive to our social conditioning. We've been taught that being agreeable, accommodating, and seeking consensus builds positive relationships, and in many contexts it does. But when it comes to establishing respect and authority, these same behaviors can undermine your position entirely. What you're about to discover might fundamentally change how you approach your interactions. The psychological mechanisms that govern respect aren't about being liked, they're about consequences. Stay with me, because understanding this distinction could transform situations where you felt powerless into opportunities to establish genuine authority. Has this ever happened to you? You're in a situation where someone repeatedly crosses your boundaries, and despite your polite requests and reasonable explanations, nothing changes. In fact, the more you explain yourself, the less seriously you're taken. This frustrating cycle isn't random. It's rooted in fundamental human psychology. The truth is, humans don't respect what they can manipulate. And emotional reactivity is perhaps the easiest pathway to manipulation. When your responses become predictable, when others know exactly which buttons to push to get a reaction from you, you've unknowingly surrendered your authority. The path to genuine respect requires something that might feel uncomfortable at first: emotional solidity, the ability to remain unmoved in situations designed to provoke you, not through coldness or indifference, but through a centered confidence that signals you cannot be easily manipulated. What we'll explore together is how to shift from seeking approval to demonstrating consequence, a subtle but powerful distinction that changes everything. And it begins with understanding the psychological forces at play when exercising power in silence is a psychological masterclass that few truly understand. When someone hurls an insult your way and you respond with calculated silence, you're not just avoiding conflict, you're commanding the interaction. That momentary vacuum creates discomfort that works in your favor. The aggressor suddenly finds themselves in quicksand of their own making, sinking deeper with each second you withhold reaction. This strategic silence represents a profound understanding of human nature. People instinctively fill empty spaces in conversation, often to their detriment. When you refuse to provide that release valve, you're essentially forcing them to sit with their own hostility, creating a mirror that reflects their behavior back at them. Think of authority as a precious resource that requires protection rather than constant validation. Many make the fundamental mistake of believing authority comes from being liked or understood. The hidden truth is that authentic authority often thrives in the absence of explanation. When you constantly justify your actions, you inadvertently communicate doubt in your own decisions. The journey to mastering this approach involves a significant mindset shift. Instead of viewing your authority position as something that needs constant defense, recognize it as a fortress that stands on its own merit. This doesn't mean becoming cold or distant. Rather, it means being selective about when and how you engage. I've witnessed countless transformation stories where professionals finally break through challenging relationships by embracing this principle. One executive I worked with was constantly undermined by a team member until he stopped explaining his decisions and instead allowed strategic pauses to do the heavy lifting. The dynamic shifted remarkably within weeks. What's particularly fascinating is how this principle crosses cultural boundaries. From boardrooms in Tokyo to negotiation tables in New York, the power of measured silence translates universally. It speaks to something fundamental in human psychology. We respect what seems unshakable. Now, I want to go even deeper into this concept by exploring how this principle of controlled response applies beyond just handling insults. There's a broader application that affects everything from leadership presence to personal relationships, where the same psychological mechanisms operate but manifest differently depending on the context. If you're recognizing these patterns in your own interactions, write "Silence speaks" in the comments below. Dominating the frame in any situation prevents others from defining you. It's crucial to set narratives rather than becoming part of someone else's narrative. This hidden truth forms the foundation of all influential communication, whether you're navigating a high-stakes negotiation or simply trying to get your point across at a family dinner. Think about the last time you felt completely railroaded in a conversation. Maybe your boss framed a discussion around your performance in terms of a single mistake, or a friend positioned an entire argument around their perspective from the start. What happened? You likely found yourself playing defense, trying to justify yourself within their established reality. This mental battlefield is where true power dynamics emerge. When someone else controls the frame, they've essentially created the rules of engagement that benefit their position. It's like trying to win a game where someone else wrote all the rules. The transformation in your effectiveness comes when you recognize this hidden mechanism. The journey toward frame control begins with awareness. Notice how often you accept others' premises without question. Why were you late? Already assumes you've done something wrong. The skilled frame controller might respond, "I prioritized finishing the Henderson project before our meeting," instantly reframing tardiness as strategic prioritization. Behind the scenes of every successful leader and communicator lies this fundamental understanding. They don't just respond to situations, they define them. When Elon Musk faces criticism about missed deadlines, he doesn't apologize within that frame. Instead, he pivots to the unprecedented nature of his company's innovations, establishing a new frame where traditional timelines become irrelevant. This isn't about manipulation. It's about recognizing the inevitable reality that every interaction has a frame. The only question is, will it be yours or someone else's? The mindset shift comes when you realize that accepting someone else's frame is itself a choice, one that silently surrenders your power in the exchange. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring the practical techniques that allow you to establish and maintain frame control, even when facing significant resistance. The psychological principles at work here reveal fascinating insights about human communication patterns and how quickly power can shift. In an interaction, remember that frame control isn't just about winning arguments. It's about creating space for authentic communication on your terms. It's about ensuring your truth gets fair consideration rather than being dismissed before it's even heard. The revelations about how frames work can completely transform your impact in both personal and professional contexts. If what I've shared resonates with your own experiences in conversations where you felt powerless, write in the comments. "I'm taking back the frame. This inner strength is what creates true influence. When you enter a room with proper framing, people naturally align with your reality instead of you conforming to theirs. Think about how people instinctively move aside when someone walks with purpose and conviction. This isn't about being aggressive. It's about knowing your worth and carrying yourself accordingly. The transformation happens when you realize that controlling these social dynamics is less about what you say and more about your internal state. Someone who needs constant validation will leak that neediness into every interaction, even if their words suggest confidence. Your mindset becomes visible through subtle cues others can sense but rarely articulate. Let's explore the hidden truth behind holding boundaries. When you establish a boundary and someone challenges it, the natural response is to justify yourself, a trap that immediately weakens your position. "I can't meet Friday because I have other plans," turns into, "Well, I was planning to organize my closet, but I guess I could reschedule." This is the moment power shifts away from you. Instead, practice stating your boundary once, clearly and without apology. "Friday doesn't work for me." Then, and this is crucial, remain comfortable with the silence that follows. This simple act communicates volumes about your self-respect and creates a fascinating psychological impact on the interaction. Behind the scenes of powerful social dynamics is the understanding that explanations are often negotiations in disguise. The person who requires less approval from others naturally assumes the dominant position. This doesn't mean becoming cold or distant, quite the opposite. When you're secure in your boundaries, you can be warmer, more genuine, and more present because you're not constantly calculating how to please others. The journey toward mastering these principles begins with awareness of your current patterns. Notice how often you feel compelled to explain yourself when a simple statement would suffice. Observe your physical positioning in rooms. Do you automatically take space or shrink to accommodate others? These revelations about your default behaviors are the foundation for deliberate change. What's particularly fascinating is how these subtle adjustments ripple through every area of your life. When you stop seeking permission to exist in your own way, relationships transform, professional opportunities emerge, and you discover a level of inner peace that wasn't previously accessible. If what I've shared resonates with your experiences or challenges your current perspective, write "Mastering the Frame" in the comments. Now, I want to go even deeper into how these principles apply in specific high-stakes situations where the pressure to compromise your frame intensifies. But imagine turning this awareness into productive action. When dealing with difficult personalities, the key lies in seeing their ego for what it really is, a shield covering insecurity. This insight transforms confrontations into opportunities rather than obstacles. By recognizing when someone's ego is driving their behavior, you gain a profound advantage, not to manipulate, but to navigate the situation with clarity. I've witnessed countless situations where tensions dissolved simply because one person recognized the ego dynamics at play. Behind every arrogant statement or defensive posture lies a person seeking validation, often unconsciously. This revelation becomes particularly valuable in professional environments where egos can dominate decision-making processes. The transformation happens when you stop taking ego-driven behavior personally. That dismissive colleague, that micromanaging boss, their actions reveal more about their internal landscape than about your worth or capabilities. This shift in perspective is liberating. Suddenly you're no longer trapped in emotional reactions, but operating from a place of understanding. Consider the hidden truth behind most workplace conflicts. They rarely stem from the surface issues being discussed. The underlying current usually involves threatened egos seeking to maintain status or avoid vulnerability. By recognizing this pattern, you can address the real issue rather than getting caught in unproductive cycles. The journey toward mastering ego awareness in relationships isn't about gaining power over others. Rather, it's about creating space for authentic connection by seeing beyond defensive postures. When someone unnecessarily criticizes your idea during a meeting, responding with curiosity rather than defensiveness often reveals their concerns and ultimately strengthens the outcome. What's particularly fascinating is how this awareness creates ripple effects. As you respond differently to ego-driven behavior, you'll notice others following suit. The emotional intelligence you demonstrate becomes contagious, gradually shifting the culture around you toward more genuine interactions. This understanding extends beyond professional settings into personal relationships as well. How many family disagreements escalate because we're responding to perceived attacks on our identity rather than addressing the actual issue at hand? The simple act of recognizing when ego is driving an interaction can prevent years of misunderstandings. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring practical techniques for remaining centered when faced with challenging personalities. These approaches have helped countless people transform potentially volatile situations into productive exchanges. If what we've discussed resonates with your experiences dealing with difficult people, write ego insights in the comments. I'd love to know how many of you have already begun noticing these patterns in your daily interactions. Real power isn't about rushing forward with brute force. It's about the strategic patience to observe, analyze, and strike at precisely the right moment. Think of a master chess player who understands that the game isn't won in the opening moves, but in the endgame. The most influential people in history weren't necessarily the loudest or most aggressive. They were often those who understood the value of calculated restraint. When you develop this mindset of strategic waiting, you begin to recognize opportunities that others miss entirely. There's a hidden transformation that occurs when you stop responding to every stimulus and instead cultivate the discipline to wait. This patience isn't passive, it's an active form of power that few truly master. Consider how nature itself demonstrates this principle. The river doesn't fight the boulder in its path. It simply continues its journey, gradually reshaping the obstacle over time. The most profound impact often comes not from immediate reaction, but from consistent, patient pressure applied at the right points. And when it comes to loyalty, there's a fundamental truth that shapes all meaningful relationships. Those who stand by you deserve your protection and elevation. Loyalty is a rare commodity in today's world, where temporary alliances form and dissolve based on convenience. When someone demonstrates true loyalty, recognizing and rewarding that commitment isn't just generous, it's strategically sound. However, the flip side of this principle contains equally important wisdom. When faced with disrespect, the truly powerful don't engage in heated exchanges or desperate attempts to win approval. They simply withdraw their energy completely. This isn't about revenge or punishment. It's about the disciplined allocation of your most valuable resource, your attention. Cold indifference speaks volumes more than angry outbursts. When you remove someone from your sphere of concern, you make a profound statement about your own value and boundaries. The journey to personal sovereignty requires this discernment about who deserves your energy and who doesn't. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining how these principles manifest in both personal relationships and professional environments. The most respected leaders understand that power isn't just about what you do. It's about what you choose not to do and when you choose to do it. If you've ever experienced the clarity that comes from applying these principles in your own life, write strategic silence in the comments below. When you're in a position of leadership, your reactions become a form of communication more powerful than your words. Ever notice how the most respected people rarely seem rattled? That's not coincidence, it's strategy. When you respond emotionally to disrespect, you're essentially broadcasting insecurity. And in the subtle language of power dynamics, that's like showing your cards too early in the game. The true essence of authority isn't found in defending your position. It's in never feeling the need to. Think about the figures in your life who command natural respect. They don't chase acknowledgement. They create an environment where respect flows toward them naturally. This represents a fundamental shift in mindset, moving from reactive to strategic presence. Consider the transformative power of selective silence. When someone challenges you, the immediate impulse is to respond, to correct, to defend. But what happens in that space when you choose not to? Something remarkable. You maintain control of the narrative. Silence, properly deployed, isn't weakness. It's a declaration that you operate on your own timeline, not someone else's urgency. Now I want to go even deeper into this principle of controlled access. Human psychology consistently values what's scarce. The less available something is, the more we desire it. This isn't manipulation, it's simply understanding the architecture of human attention. When you make yourself constantly available, constantly explaining, constantly present, you inadvertently devalue your presence. Look at any influential figure. They carefully curate when and how they appear. Their words carry weight precisely because they aren't dispensing them continuously. This selective presence creates a gravitational pull. People lean in when you speak because your voice isn't background noise. It's a rare event worth attending to. This journey toward authentic authority requires patience. The immediate gratification of defending yourself feels good in the moment, but undermines your position in the long term. The hidden truth here is that true power rarely announces itself. It simply is, and others recognize it without explanation. Remember that perception isn't just about what you show, but what you choose to withhold. Every time you resist the impulse to explain yourself unnecessarily, you're building authority capital. Every time you allow a challenge to hang in the air unaddressed, you're communicating that your position doesn't require constant defense. This principle extends beyond personal interactions into every domain where influence matters. Notice how the most impactful leaders create environments where others come to them, rather than constantly reaching outward. They've mastered the art of pulling rather than pushing. If this approach to authority resonates with your experience, write "silent strength" in the comments. I'm curious how many of you have already discovered this principle in your own leadership journey. By not being overly accessible, your presence demands more respect and intrigue. Creating selective boundaries around access can heighten your influence. There's a reason why world-class performers, thought leaders, and influential figures aren't constantly available to everyone. This selective availability isn't just about logistics, it's a fundamental principle of human psychology that shapes how others perceive your value. Think about the transformation that happens when you become more selective with your time and attention. People naturally place higher value on what they can't easily obtain. It's like the difference between a regular store that's always open versus an exclusive boutique with limited hours. The latter creates an atmosphere of anticipation and importance around every interaction. I've witnessed this hidden truth firsthand in professional environments. A colleague who was constantly available for every meeting, every question, and every minor issue found himself overwhelmed and undervalued. When he restructured his availability, setting office hours, requiring meeting agendas, and creating systems for routine questions, something remarkable happened. Not only did his productivity increase, but the quality of his interactions improved dramatically. People came prepared, respected his input more, and paradoxically felt they were getting more value from their more limited access. This journey towards strategic inaccessibility isn't about becoming aloof or disconnected. Instead, it's about creating intentional frameworks that elevate every interaction. When Tesla announces a new product, they don't make it immediately available to everyone. They create wait lists, staged rollouts, and reservation systems. This isn't just about managing production, it's a deliberate strategy that builds anticipation and perceived value. The mindset shift here is subtle but powerful. Instead of measuring your impact by how available you are, measure it by the value you deliver in. Each interaction, quality over quantity, becomes your guiding principle. This applies whether you're a business leader, creative professional, or building your personal brand in any field. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring how to practically implement these boundaries without alienating people who matter. It's a delicate balance that requires both confidence and tact. The key lies in understanding the difference between being inaccessible and being selectively accessible. If you're finding yourself resonating with these ideas about strategic accessibility, write "boundaries create value" in the comments below. Mystery and presence breeds power by keeping others guessing and hesitant. When you reveal everything about yourself, you surrender a fundamental advantage in social dynamics. This principle goes deeper than many realize. It's not about being fake or manipulative, but understanding the psychology behind human interaction. Think about the people who have most captivated your attention throughout your life. Were they completely transparent, or did something about them remain slightly out of reach? That subtle distance, that invisible barrier that makes someone not fully knowable, creates a magnetic pull. It's a psychological transformation that happens in the observer's mind. Your personal information is like currency in the social marketplace. Each revelation is a transaction that potentially diminishes your value through overexposure. The most influential figures throughout history maintained an element of inscrutability. They understood that when others can't fully categorize you, they remain engaged, curious, and often more respectful. I've witnessed the power dynamic shift dramatically in meetings when one person shares too much personal information while another reveals little. The oversharer, despite perhaps being more qualified or intelligent, subtly cedes authority to the more reserved individual. This isn't just theory. It's observable human behavior that unfolds in boardrooms, classrooms, and relationships every day. Consider how this principle manifests in your own life. Have you noticed how quickly people lose interest in those whose every thought, feeling, and experience is immediately accessible? The mind craves puzzles to solve. When there's nothing left to discover about you, attention naturally drifts elsewhere. This doesn't mean becoming cold or disconnected. Rather, it's about cultivating a sense of depth beyond what's immediately visible. By revealing yourself gradually and strategically, you create a journey of discovery for others. Each new revelation becomes more valuable precisely because it wasn't freely given. Now, I want to go even deeper into this counterintuitive truth about emotional transparency. While our culture celebrates authenticity and openness, there's a hidden wisdom in the selective sharing of your inner world. The most profound connections aren't built on immediate and complete transparency, but through the gradual unfolding of mutual discovery. If you're recognizing patterns in your own interactions where overexposure has undermined your position, type "reclaiming mystery" in the comments below. The real transformation begins when you grasp that unpredictability serves as your psychological armor in social dynamics. Think about it. When someone can't anticipate your next move, they're forced to react to you rather than manipulate you. It's like playing chess. When your opponent can't see 3 moves ahead, They become defensive rather than offensive. I've noticed this shift in my own interactions. When I started varying my response patterns, sometimes answering immediately, other times taking hours, occasionally being warm, other times professionally distant, people began approaching me differently. They stopped taking me for granted. This isn't about being difficult. It's about reclaiming your emotional sovereignty. The hidden truth here is that most relationships operate on unconscious power dynamics. We're conditioned to be consistent and predictable because it makes us easier to manage. But nature's most successful survivors are adaptable, not predictable. When you become comfortable with measured emotional distance, you develop what psychologists call detached awareness, the ability to engage fully while maintaining your emotional center. Consider how differently people treat those they can't easily read. There's a natural respect, even reverence, that emerges. This is why historical leaders often cultivated an air of mystery. They understood that being unknowable in certain aspects created a psychological advantage that no amount of conventional authority could match. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining what happens in the space between stimulus and response. Most people react automatically to social cues. A criticism arrives, and they immediately defend or apologize. But when you introduce variability and thoughtfulness into that gap, you reclaim something essential: your decision-making power. This journey towards strategic unpredictability isn't about manipulation. It's about liberation from other people's expectations and control mechanisms. It allows authentic choices rather than programmed responses. When you own your emotional distance, you're not coldly disconnecting. You're actually creating space for more genuine connection on your terms. The impact extends beyond individual interactions. Over time, this mindset reshapes your entire social ecosystem. People begin to value your attention more when they can't predict when or how they'll receive it. They listen more carefully when they can't anticipate your perspective. They respect your boundaries more when those boundaries aren't easily mapped. If this concept of strategic unpredictability resonates with you as a path to personal freedom, write "breaking the pattern" in the comments below. Detachment isn't about being cold or uncaring. Rather, it's about developing a healthy emotional independence that protects your psychological well-being while paradoxically strengthening your connections. When you're emotionally detached, you observe interactions with clarity instead of reacting from a place of need or desperation. Think about the times you've wanted something or someone so badly that you could feel the gnawing anxiety in your chest. That intense desire creates a magnetic pull, but in the wrong direction. The more desperately you cling, the more power you surrender. It's a hidden truth of human dynamics that most of us learn through painful experience rather than foresight. I've seen this transformation in my own life. Years ago, I was constantly seeking validation from specific relationships. My happiness depended entirely on others' responses to me. The revelation came when I realized that by needing less, I was actually receiving more. People began responding differently, more respectfully, more attentively, when they sensed I wasn't dependent on their approval. This principle crosses into every realm of human interaction. In negotiations, the person who can genuinely walk away holds the advantage. In friendships, those who maintain their own identity and boundaries tend to be more valued. In romantic relationships, maintaining your sense of self prevents the slow erosion of attraction that often follows complete emotional dependence. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because the journey toward emotional detachment involves developing what psychologists call internal validation. This means your sense of worth comes primarily from within rather than external sources. When you achieve this mindset shift, you become remarkably resilient to manipulation and control. Consider how people with strong emotional detachment navigate rejection. While others might spiral into self-doubt or desperation, the detached individual acknowledges the discomfort but doesn't allow it to define them. They recognize that another person's response reflects that person's preferences, limitations, and circumstances, not their inherent value. This doesn't mean suppressing emotions or building walls. It's quite the contrary. Emotional detachment allows you to experience feelings fully without being controlled by them. You can love deeply while still maintaining your center. You can care intensely while still protecting your peace. This balance is where true relational power resides. The impact of mastering emotional detachment extends well beyond your immediate relationships. It influences how you approach career decisions, handle criticism, and navigate life's inevitable disappointments. It's about creating a stable internal environment that external circumstances cannot easily disturb. If you've experienced this kind of emotional freedom, or if you're working toward it, drop a comment saying, "I choose my peace," so I know we're on the same wavelength. The path to emotional freedom is both challenging and liberating, and recognizing where you stand is the first step toward mastery. By strategically controlling your presence, you optimize the power in your interactions. Mastery over your emotions ensures they cannot be used against you. This emotional discipline creates an aura of mystery that naturally draws others toward you. When you maintain this calculated distance, people begin projecting their own desires and interpretations onto your canvas. They fill in the blanks with what they want to see, often attributing qualities to you that serve their own narratives. This psychological phenomenon works entirely in your favor. Consider the transformation that occurs when you embrace silence during negotiations or conflicts. Most people feel compelled to fill uncomfortable silences, often revealing their hand or making concessions simply to ease the tension. Yet when you remain comfortable with these pauses, you create a vacuum that others rush to fill, usually to your advantage. This journey towards strategic withdrawal doesn't happen overnight. It requires a deliberate recalibration of your social instincts. We've been conditioned since childhood to seek validation through constant sharing and connection. The revelation comes when you realize that true influence often emerges from selective engagement, not constant availability. Behind the scenes of every powerful relationship dynamic lies this fundamental truth. Scarcity creates value. When your presence, opinions, and emotional reactions become rare commodities, their worth increases exponentially. People naturally value what they must work to obtain. There's a hidden wisdom in understanding when to step back. Rather than viewing withdrawal as a disconnection, see it as a powerful repositioning, creating space for others to recognize your value. The impact of your occasional absence often resonates more powerfully than your constant presence. Think about the people in your life who command the most respect. Notice how they've mastered this delicate balance, being present without being predictable, engaged without being desperate. Their influence doesn't come from dominating every conversation, but from making each interaction meaningful through its deliberate nature. Now, I want to go even deeper into applying these principles across different areas of your life. The strategic positioning we're discussing isn't limited to personal relationships. It extends to professional settings, negotiations, and even your digital presence. The same psychological principles that make someone intriguing in person can be translated to how you present yourself in all domains. The underlying mindset shift requires recognizing that your attention, energy, and presence are finite resources deserving careful allocation. When you treat them as valuable assets rather than unlimited offerings, you naturally begin to distribute them more strategically. This isn't about manipulation, but rather about honoring your own worth and creating healthier relationship dynamics. If you're nodding along to these insights right now, write strategic silence in the comments. I'm curious how many of you are already practicing this powerful approach to presence. This psychological maneuver brings us to a deeper truth about human interaction. Emotional distance creates magnetic pull. Think about it. When someone is slightly out of reach, we naturally lean forward, trying to close that gap. By maintaining this calculated space, you're essentially creating a vacuum that others will strive to fill with their attention and efforts. The real transformation happens when you master the rhythm of giving and withholding approval. It's almost like conducting an orchestra of human emotions. When you praise someone who's insecure, their face lights up. They're receiving something they desperately crave. But the moment you create that slight withdrawal, you'll notice their behavior shift as they unconsciously work harder to regain your approval. Behind the scenes of this dynamic is our fundamental need for validation. We're social creatures wired to seek confirmation of our worth from others. This isn't manipulative when you understand it as simply working with human nature rather than against it. The insecure person isn't your victim. They're participating in an unspoken agreement where your approval becomes valuable currency. What's fascinating is how this principle reveals itself in everyday relationships. Think about that friend who seems slightly indifferent yet commands attention at social gatherings. Or consider how the most respected leaders maintain a certain emotional autonomy while still connecting authentically with their teams. The hidden wisdom here isn't about becoming cold or distant permanently. It's about understanding the power of your attention and deploying it strategically rather than giving it away freely without thought. When everything is given without measure, it loses its value. This applies to material gifts and emotional availability alike. I want to go even deeper into this delicate balance of distance and connection, because mastering this principle requires genuine self-awareness. You must recognize when you're creating distance out of your own insecurity versus when you're doing it as a conscious choice to maintain healthy boundaries and influence. The journey toward this understanding begins with observing your own reactions. Do you find yourself constantly seeking approval, or are you comfortable setting the terms of engagement in your relationships? Your answer reveals whether you're currently the influencer or the influenced. What makes this approach so powerful is that it works universally in personal relationships, professional settings, and even casual social interactions. The person who maintains slight emotional autonomy while remaining engaged becomes the natural center of gravity. If this principle resonates with your experiences, write "autonomy matters" in the comments. Now let's examine how this distance principle connects to the next rule in our exploration. Insecure individuals are more susceptible to seeking validation, making them easier targets for subtle influence. This isn't about exploiting weaknesses, but understanding the psychology that makes certain people more responsive to external validation. When someone constantly doubts their own worth, they naturally gravitate toward those who provide the affirmation they crave. What makes this dynamic particularly powerful is how predictable it becomes. The person seeking validation develops patterns. They check for reactions more frequently. They adjust their behavior based on perceived approval, and they become increasingly attuned to even the smallest shifts in your response to them. This creates a psychological framework where controlled praise becomes extraordinarily effective. The key revelation here is that praise doesn't need to be constant. In fact, it shouldn't be. When validation is too freely given, it loses its power. Instead, the strategic application of praise creates a more impactful impression. Think of it as a carefully crafted journey of reinforcement rather than a continuous stream of compliments. This mirrors what behavioral psychologists have observed for decades in various settings. The most powerful reinforcement schedules aren't those that reward every action, but those that provide intermittent recognition. This creates a state where the individual remains engaged and motivated, continuously working toward that next moment of validation. What's fascinating about this hidden truth is how it transforms ordinary interactions. When you understand this principle, conversations become more than exchanges of information. They become opportunities for meaningful connection and influence. By recognizing someone's contributions at strategic moments, you're not manipulating them. You're speaking to a fundamental human need. The decision about when and how to provide validation also matters tremendously. Timing your praise to coincide with behaviors you want to encourage creates a subtle but powerful association. The person begins to connect their actions with your positive response, strengthening the likelihood they'll repeat those behaviors in the future. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring how this principle extends beyond casual interactions and into long-term relationship dynamics. The same psychological mechanisms that make controlled praise effective in brief encounters become even more powerful when applied consistently over time. This creates a pattern where your approval becomes increasingly valuable to the other person. What's particularly interesting is how this operates below conscious awareness. Most people don't recognize when they've become dependent on another's validation. It happens gradually through a series of small moments and exchanges that collectively shape their perception and behavior. The transformation happens so naturally that it rarely triggers resistance or suspicion. If you've ever noticed yourself feeling particularly drawn to someone who doesn't freely offer approval but makes it feel special when they do, you've experienced this dynamic from the other side. This isn't coincidence. It's psychology in action. If this information resonates with your own observations about human behavior, write in the comments. Psychology explains everything. The psychology behind withheld praise reveals something fascinating about human connection. When we deliberately pause our validation, it creates a vacuum that people rush to fill with their own efforts. It's like watching a natural law of human interaction unfold. The moment approval becomes scarce, its perceived value skyrockets. Think about your own experiences with this dynamic. Remember that time someone whose opinion you valued seemed unimpressed by your achievement. That gnawing feeling wasn't just disappointment. It was your mind working overtime, reassessing and recalibrating. This internal process is remarkably consistent across different personality types, though the intensity varies. Behind the scenes of this psychological mechanism is our fundamental need for belonging. We're wired for connection from our earliest moments and approval signals, safety within our social structures. When that signal gets disrupted, it creates a form of cognitive dissonance that demands resolution. Your brain essentially says, "This relationship matters to me, but the feedback doesn't align with my expectations. Something must change." The transformation happens in those moments of uncertainty. People often elevate their performance, adjust their approach, or intensify their commitment when facing this ambiguity. It's as if the absence of praise creates a hunger for validation that drives remarkable effort. I've witnessed this in professional settings where teams surpassed expectations not because of constant affirmation, but because of thoughtfully withheld approval that sparked their intrinsic motivation. Now, understanding this mechanism comes with significant ethical considerations. There's a profound difference between strategic withholding with positive intent and manipulation for personal gain. The former recognizes human psychology and works with it to inspire growth. The latter exploits vulnerability for control. The hidden truth is that both approaches work, but only one builds sustainable relationships and genuine development. The impact of this knowledge extends beyond personal interactions. Educational systems, leadership frameworks, and even parenting styles incorporate variations of this principle. When used wisely, it allows for authentic development while preserving dignity and autonomy. The journey toward mastering this balance requires self-awareness and emotional intelligence. What makes this approach powerful is its subtlety. Unlike direct criticism, which often triggers defensiveness, or empty praise, which can lose meaning over time, strategically withheld validation creates space for self-reflection. This space becomes fertile ground for insights and improvements that might otherwise never emerge. Now, I want to go even deeper into how this psychological principle manifests in different contexts, from professional environments to personal relationships, and examine the nuances that make it either constructive or potentially harmful. If this concept has ever played out in your own life, write "recognition matters" in the comments below. Think about your most frustrating conversations. You text someone and wait hours for a reply, but when they need something, they expect an immediate response. This isn't random. It's a calculated power dynamic at work, and understanding it can transform how you navigate relationships. The power of pace in communication is often overlooked. Someone who controls response times is essentially saying, "My schedule matters more than yours." It's subtle but effective. They're training you to value their time while devaluing yours. I've watched friends anxiously check their phones for responses while the person they're waiting on deliberately takes their time, creating an imbalance that shapes the entire relationship. The psychology behind this is fascinating. When someone varies their response time unpredictably, they create what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement, the same mechanism that makes gambling addictive. You never know when you'll get the reward of their attention, so you stay engaged longer, checking more frequently and valuing the interaction more highly. This isn't just about text messages. Think about the colleague who's always late to meetings with you but perfectly punctual with your boss, or the friend who keeps you waiting but would never dare do the same to someone they're trying to impress. These aren't scheduling issues, they're hierarchy statements. What's particularly interesting is how this manipulation of time transcends digital spaces. Even in person, those who understand this dynamic will control conversations by interrupting, changing subjects, or suddenly becoming unavailable. They're essentially saying, "I decide when and how long we engage on any topic." The revelation here isn't just recognizing when this happens to you, but understanding the hidden impact it has on your self-worth. When you consistently accommodate someone else's timeline, you're unconsciously accepting a subordinate position in the relationship. This pattern becomes internalized, affecting how you approach not just this relationship, but others in your life. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining how to recognize when you're caught in this power imbalance and the subtle shifts you can make to regain equilibrium. The journey toward balanced relationships begins with awareness of these hidden dynamics that most people never consciously identify. If you've experienced this timing manipulation and recognized it in your own relationships, type "time matters" in the comments. I'm curious how many of you have noticed this pattern before it was pointed out. Silence and delay in responses can fracture others' power and amplify your presence. Reacting deliberately and intentionally constructs the rhythm others must adjust to. This hidden dimension of communication reveals itself in the spaces between words, in those moments when you choose patience over immediate reaction. Think about it. When someone asks you a question and you respond instantly, what message does that convey? Often it signals eagerness, perhaps even desperation to please. But when you pause, allowing a thoughtful silence to fill the space, you transform the entire dynamic. This isn't about being rude or dismissive. It's about owning your presence in the conversation. I've witnessed this transformation countless times in negotiation settings. The person who rushes to fill every silence typically ends up conceding more. Meanwhile, the one who sits comfortably in silence, who responds with measured timing, often emerges with greater influence over the outcome. It's a subtle shift in behavior with profound consequences. The psychology behind this is fascinating. When you delay your response, you create a momentary tension, a cognitive space where the other person begins questioning themselves rather than questioning you. Did I say something wrong? Are they considering a counteroffer? What are they thinking? This internal dialogue gives you leverage without speaking a single word. Consider historical figures known for their commanding presence. Many practice this art of the deliberate pause. Winston Churchill, despite his reputation for quick wit, was masterful at strategic silence. In critical cabinet meetings, he would often take his time before responding to proposals, allowing anticipation to build and ensuring his words carried maximum weight. The journey toward mastering this skill begins with self-awareness. Most of us have been conditioned to believe that quick responses demonstrate competence and confidence. We fear silence might be interpreted as hesitation or uncertainty. But this mindset requires a profound shift, recognizing that whoever controls the timing of an interaction often controls its direction. This isn't merely a professional technique, it's a life philosophy about owning your personal boundaries and psychological space. When someone makes a request, taking time to consider rather than automatically accommodating shows self-respect. It communicates that your time and attention are valuable resources, not freely available on demand. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring how different personality types respond to this technique. While some people immediately recognize and respect the power dynamic created by measured responses, others might initially push against it, attempting to reclaim control through various means. Understanding these patterns allows you to navigate any interaction with greater emotional intelligence. If this concept resonates with your experiences, write strategic silence in the comments. I'm curious how many of you have already intuited this principle in your own interactions. This understanding of how time and unpredictability function together creates a powerful psychological dynamic. When you weaponize time through controlled unpredictability, you're essentially creating a form of anticipatory tension in others. They can never quite settle into a comfortable rhythm with you, which maintains your position of strength in any interaction. Think about the most influential people in your life or in history. Their impact often stems not just from what they did, but when and how unexpectedly they chose to do it. This timing element is what transforms ordinary actions into memorable demonstrations of power. Now, about that concept of crushing once with finality, this represents one of the most misunderstood aspects of personal power. Many people believe that power requires constant displays of force, but this actually diminishes your influence over time. When you reserve your full strength for rare but decisive moments, you create a lasting impression that reverberates long after the event itself. I've witnessed this transformation firsthand in professional settings. Leaders who constantly flex their authority find themselves needing to do it more and more frequently as their impact diminishes. Meanwhile, those who remain measured but occasionally demonstrate their full capability create a shadow of respect that affects every interaction, even when they're being completely collaborative. The hidden truth here lies in human psychology. Our minds give disproportionate weight to definitive experiences. A single, clear boundary, properly enforced, creates a mental framework that people carry forward in all future interactions with you. It becomes part of their internal map of who you are. This principle extends beyond personal relationships into negotiations, career advancement, and even parenting. The person who can remain composed while others become emotional holds a decisive advantage in any exchange. you're controlled. Unpredictability becomes a force multiplier that allows you to achieve outcomes with minimal effort. The real revelation comes when you realize this isn't about manipulation, but about authentic communication. By being selective about when and how you deploy your full strength, you're actually creating clearer signals for others to understand your boundaries and values. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining how these principles manifest in specific real-world scenarios and how you can implement them in your own life without coming across as calculating or cold. If what I'm saying resonates with your experiences, write "time is leverage" in the comments below. Let me take you deeper into the psychology behind respect and power. When someone crosses your boundary and you allow it, something profound happens in their subconscious mind. The respect they initially held for you begins to dissolve, replaced by a subtle sense of dominance. This transformation isn't immediate or even conscious. It's an ancient part of our hierarchical programming that dates back to our earliest tribal days. Think about the hidden truth of how respect actually works in human relationships. It's rarely built through kindness alone. Rather, respect is earned through a combination of value provision and boundary defense. The journey toward commanding genuine respect requires understanding this fundamental balance. I've witnessed countless men attempt to win respect through endless generosity and accommodation, only to find themselves increasingly disrespected. The revelation here is counterintuitive but powerful. Your willingness to enforce consequences creates the very foundation of respect that most men desperately seek. Behind the scenes of every human interaction is this delicate dance of boundaries and tests. When you establish a boundary and someone tests it, that moment becomes pivotal. Your response in that critical moment impacts not just that single interaction, but the entire future dynamic between you. The most respected individuals I've encountered all share one trait: decisive clarity about their boundaries. They don't hesitate or apologize for defending what they've already established as important. This unwavering stance communicates something profound to others, that your psychological territory is protected not by negotiation, but by immediate enforcement. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining what happens in the mind of someone who tests your boundaries. Their behavior isn't random, it's an unconscious assessment of your position in the social hierarchy. When you respond with immediate, proportional consequences, you're communicating directly to their primitive brain that you occupy a position of strength. Consider the impact this has on every relationship in your life: romantic partners, colleagues, friends, and family. Each time you allow a boundary violation without consequence, you're sending a silent but powerful message about your place in the relationship's power structure. The decision to enforce or surrender shapes how others perceive your fundamental value and standing. If you're finding yourself nodding along as I explain this dynamic, drop a comment saying, "Boundaries create respect." I'd love to know how many of you recognize this pattern from your own experiences. Think about the last meaningful conversation you had. Was there a moment when silence spoke louder than words? That deliberate pause that hung in the air, creating weight and anticipation. It's fascinating how the absence of sound can actually increase your presence in a room. When you master strategic silence, you're not just avoiding words, you're actively communicating authority. I've observed this firsthand in high-stakes negotiations. The person who rushes to fill every quiet moment is usually the one giving ground. Meanwhile, the individual comfortable with letting silence stretch is the one who often walks away with the better deal. This isn't manipulation. It's understanding the rhythm of human interaction and the power dynamics that unfold in those unspoken moments. The unpredictability factor plays just as crucial a role in your strategic toolkit. When people can't anticipate your next move, they remain alert and engaged. Think about how quickly we tune out predictable speakers compared to those who keep us guessing with unexpected insights or approaches. That's the difference between being background noise and commanding genuine attention. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining how decisive action transforms your influence. Have you noticed how the most effective leaders don't just make decisions? They make them in a way that demonstrates unwavering commitment. There's a profound difference between simply stating a boundary and enforcing it with clear consequences. The former invites negotiation, the latter establishes respect. This transformation in how others perceive your authority doesn't happen overnight. It requires a consistent pattern of following through on what you say. Each time you declare an intention and execute it exactly as stated, you're reinforcing a powerful message about your reliability and resolve. People learn quickly who means what they say and who's simply making empty pronouncements. The journey toward commanding greater influence often involves difficult moments where you must stand your ground when it would be easier to yield. These pivotal decision points reveal your true character and commitment to your principles. What's fascinating is how these moments of firmness, when handled with dignity rather than aggression, actually strengthen relationships rather than damaging them. Behind the scenes of every influential person's rise is this consistent pattern of clear communication followed by aligned action. The hidden truth many miss is that power doesn't come from position or title. It emerges from this congruence between words and deeds that builds over time, creating a foundation of authentic authority that no formal designation can match. If you've been nodding along as I've been explaining these concepts, write "strategic silence speaks volumes" in the comments. I'm curious how many of you have already been intuitively applying these principles in your own interactions. And if you've made it this far, you're clearly someone who values substance over noise in your communication. This journey we've taken through the power of strategic silence, unpredictability, and decisive action isn't just theory. It's a practical pathway to transforming how others perceive and respond to you. I'd love to continue this conversation with you in the comments. If these ideas resonated with you, simply write "strategic silence speaks volumes" below. It's always fascinating to discover who's truly absorbing these deeper insights. If you found value in today's exploration, consider subscribing to join our community of thoughtful communicators who understand that true influence comes from authenticity and strategic presence, not just words. Leave a like if something in this discussion clicked for you, perhaps a moment where you recognized your own communication patterns or identified an opportunity for growth. There's another dimension to this conversation waiting for you in my video on reading micro-expressions during negotiations. Click through and let's continue developing your communication mastery together.